All right. So in this video, we're going to talk about Moliere's play Tartuffe, which I'm reading out of the Norton Anthology of Drama. So Tartuffe is one of the most famous comedies in world history. It is incredibly influential. It was probably the example par excellence of French comedy in the sort of golden age of French drama. This is the age of not just Moliere, but Corneille, Racine, people like this, who really made French theater one of the dominant theatrical traditions in Europe. So, Tartuffe is also a really interesting one because of its own production history. It was first produced in 1664, and then Louis XIV banned it because the depiction of an ostensibly pious man, Tartuffe, who is in fact actually a scoundrel, really offended a lot of the Catholic clergy, a lot of the very devout Catholic lay people, and a lot of very powerful people in France at the time. And so the play was banned for 5 years, after which Moliere was able to convince the king to sort of lift the ban, possibly because of revisions to it. We know, according to the editors in the Norton, that there was at least 3 versions of Tartuffe. We don't necessarily know what those revisions look like because we only have the 3rd version. But basically, Moliere was eventually able to convince the king that the play was warning about the very types of piety being used to cover up for secular motives that had sort of driven the banning of the play in the first place. So, what's the play about? The play is set in the house of Orgon. Orgon is a nobleman, and he has brought Tartuffe into his home. Tartuffe is a poor man who claims to be super devout. By the end of the play, we learn that he is, in fact, by the 3rd act of the play, we learn that he is, in fact, a con artist. By the end of the 4th act, Orgon finally learns this. By the end of the 5th act, it is sort of publicly revealed. But Orgon and his mother, Madame Parnell, they are completely mesmerized by Tartuffe. They believe 100% that he is this great spiritual leader. He's got kind of this Rasputin quality to him. But in the sense that he is able to sort of translate his pretense of piety into the devotion of the people that he is bamboozling. However, Orgon's wife, Elmire, his son, Demi, his daughter, Marianne, Marianne's fiancé, Valère, Elmire's brother, Cleante, and the maid to Marianne, Doreen. Basically, everybody else in the household is like, yeah, this guy's a fucking charlatan. He's taking your money and eating all your food, and he wants to bang your wife, and you're totally blind to it. And Orgon's like, nope, you're all wrong. He's making up vicious bullshit. I love Tartuffe. He's the only person I really care about. The rest of you, shut the fuck up. So everybody in the household knows what Tartuffe's true character is. And it's actually quite interesting because we don't meet Tartuffe until Act 3. The first 2 acts are spent establishing by others this conflict surrounding Orgon's devotion to Tartuffe and how that is damaging him and his family. In particular, Orgon wants to break Marianne's engagement to Valère and instead force Marianne, against her will and against the will of everybody else involved, to marry Tartuffe. This becomes the big issue that really they're trying to avoid. Then, when in Act 3, when Tartuffe when he tries to seduce Elmire, Orgon's wife, she tries to use that basically to sort of blackmail him into supporting the marriage between Marianne and Valère. However, Demy, Orgon's son, who is very much a hothead, who very much sort of goes with his first instinct, he tells Orgon that Tartuffe had tried to seduce his wife. And let me find the right bit here. And there's this very interesting twist because Tartuffe basically is like, yeah, I'm guilty. Accuse me of all the sins. I am the most wretched sinner ever. Anything you can accuse me of, I will not deny it. I'm so terrible. I'm just the worst. And Orgon is like, oh my God, my friend. No, you're so great. Oh, I love you, my friend. Son, shut the fuck up. Stop lying. But the thing that in itself is fine. Like the idea of like, I'm going to falsely sort of accuse myself of crimes in order to gain sympathy. Fine. But the interesting thing is that Tartuffe doesn't do that. He doesn't falsely accuse himself of crimes necessarily. He actually tells Orgon the truth, and he uses the truth to further obscure Orgon's understanding. So Tartuffe says, so Orgon tells Demy, shut your mouth. Tartuffe says, no, let him have his say and don't accuse him. Don't send him away. Believe his story. Why be on my side? You don't know what motives I may hide. Why give me so much loyalty and love? Do you know what I'm capable of? My brother, you have total trust in me and think I'm good because of what you see? No, by my appearance you're deceived. And what I say you think must be believed. Well, believe this, I have no worth at all. The world sees me as worthy, yet I fall far below. Sin is so insidious. Then to Demy he says, dear son, do treat me as perfidious, infamous, lost, a murderer, a thief. Speak on, because my sins beyond belief can bring this shameful sinner to his knees in humble, paltry effort to appease. And then a little bit later, he actually uses the phrase, Tartuffe uses the phrase, repetition of a lie can make it true. So the interesting thing is that Tartuffe is telling Orgon the truth here. But Orgon takes it to be, and Tartuffe means him to take it to be, an overly pious acceptance of guilt. So the idea here is that Tartuffe honestly admits his crime to Orgon. And Orgon believes that Tartuffe is so holy, so humble, so pious, that not only would he never lust after my wife, but now he's admitting guilt to things that he never would have done because he genuinely believes that he is naturally guilty. It's a really interesting rhetorical technique that that Tartuffe uses here. Demy is not thrilled with this turn of events. He continues to accuse Tartuffe, and Orgon is like, I disinherit you. Tartuffe is getting everything, and he's going to marry Marianne, regardless of the fact that she hates that. like out and out legit hates it. The problem then comes because Elmire is like, listen, you're being a fucking idiot here. So you hide under this table. I'm going to call Tartuffe in here. I'm going to flirt with him. We're going to see what happens. And basically, Elmire wants Orgon to be convinced before Tartuffe is able to actually have his way with her. He leaves it a very, very long time, an uncomfortably long time, of Tartuffe just trying to get into Elmire's pants. Oh, dress. 1664. And so Orgon is now convinced, and he throws Tartuffe out of his house. But wait, there's a twist, because he has signed over the deed to his house to Tartuffe. Plus, Orgon had this strongbox of papers from a friend who had fought on the wrong side of a particular civil war. He had fought against the king, and so he's a traitor. The fact that Orgon is holding this box of papers from him could be seen as itself a form of treason, even though Orgon fought for the king during that war. Tartuffe persuaded Orgon to give him that strongbox. And so Tartuffe can take that to the king and say, look, Orgon's a traitor. Also, I have the deed to his house. Kick them out. Which indeed is what he does. Madame Parnell is initially not convinced, even when Orgon is like, I saw him trying to fuck my wife. He's like, it's gossip. Gossip, you can't trust gossip. And he's like, no, I saw it. And she's like, you jump to conclusions. He's like, no. And then Doreen, the servant, who's really awesome, by the way, is basically like, listen, man, you didn't believe any of us, now you're not being believed. How's it taste? Some. So that sort of happens. Tartuffe goes to the king, and he's like, these people need to be kicked out of their house. I own the deed to their house. Also, they should get arrested. Orgon should get arrested because of this strongbox full of stuff. So, that convinces Madame Parnell, by the way, when Tartuffe is going to have them kicked out of their house. In the final scene of the play, Tartuffe shows up with the exempt, who is a sort of king's servant, magistrate type guy, and we get the conclusion of the play. So Tartuffe has this sort of bit of verbal sparring with the people in the household, and then to the exempt he says, "Save me from this whining. I've had my fill. Do execute your orders if you will." The exempt says, "I will. I've waited much too long for that. I had to let you have your little chat. It's confirmed the facts our monarch knew. That's why, Tartuffe, I'm arresting you." Tartuffe says, "Who, me?" The exempt says, "Yes, you." Tartuffe says, "You're putting me in jail?" The exempt says, "Immediately, and there will be no bail." And so this is, I'm gonna read you the whole of the exempt's speech here, even though it's a bit lengthy. This has been called a Rex Ex Machina, which is a variation of the Deus Ex Machina, an ancient Greek technique that you sometimes get in tragedies, when a god shows up at the end and says, "Here is the resolution, here's what needs to be done, go forth and do it." Basically, a god saves the day. Comes out of nowhere, it's not justified by the plot or anything like that. We have the same thing here, except with the king. So, the exempt says, "Immediately, and there will be no bail." And then to Orgon, he says, "You may compose yourself now, sir, because we're fortunate in leadership and laws. We have a king who sees into men's hearts and cannot be deceived, so he imparts great wisdom and a talent for discernment. Thus frauds are guaranteed a quick internment. Our Prince of Reason sees things as they are, so hypocrites do not get very far. But saintly men and the truly devout he cherishes and has no doubts about. This man could not begin to fool the king, who can defend himself against the sting of much more subtle predators. And thus, when this craven pretender came to us demanding justice and accusing you, he betrayed himself. Our king could view the baseness lurking in his coward's heart. Evil like that can set a man apart. And so divine justice nodded her head. The king did not believe a word he said. It was soon confirmed he has a crime for every sin, but why squander the time to list them or the aliases he used? For the king, it's enough that he abused your friendship and your faith. And though we knew each accusation of his was untrue, our monarch himself, wanting to know just how far this impostor planned to go, had me wait to find this out, then pounce, arrest this criminal, quickly denounce the man and all his lies. And now the king orders delivered to you everything the scoundrel took, the deed, all documents, this locked box of yours and all its contents, and nullifies the contract giving away your property effective today. And finally, our monarch wants to end your worries about aiding your old friend before he went into exile, because in that same way, and in spite of the laws, you openly defended our king's right to his throne, and you were prepared to fight from his heart, and because it makes good sense that a good deed deserves a recompense, he pardons you, and wanted me to add he remembers good longer than the bad. So basically, the king, unnamed, but presumably Louis XIV, just knew that Tartuffe was a scoundrel because vibes, I guess. No, there's this, it is really this weird, I don't mean weird. It seems weird to a modern audience. It is very much this sort of kissing the king's ass type thing, where the end of the play is devoted to the king is so smart and so intuitive and so clever that he just easily uncovered the hypocrite, the imposter, the pious fraud, and he recognized that Orgon is actually a good dude, and he should get all his stuff back, and it doesn't really matter that he helped this other guy who had fought against the king and therefore was a traitor, whatevs. It's just no harm, no foul. But part of the reason this actually makes sense in the context of the 1660s is that one of the things the French Academy, the Académie Française, required of drama, because they came along. They were created under Cardinal Richelieu earlier in Louis XIV's reign, I believe, and the Académie Française basically set the standards for literature, for theater, for the French language, etc., etc. One of the things that they required of drama was propriety. And so this ending, where Moliere is basically just sucking up to the king, this likely went a long way in convincing the king to sort of allow Tartuffe to be performed again, because it fulfilled that requirement of propriety. The other thing that Moliere does is he repeatedly in this play has different characters make distinctions between pious frauds like Tartuffe and genuine devotion. So one of my favorite characters is Cléante. Cléante is he's a free thinker. He seems to be a rationalist, part of the emerging Enlightenment movement. But he, very early on, actually in the first act, addresses this sort of religious controversy that that having a pious fraud as the centerpiece of the play might be an attack on the church or on particular religious factions. So Cleant to Orgon says, I'm not the wisest man, as you espouse, nor do I know what all there is to know. But I do know, Orgon, that quid pro quo does not apply at all to false and true, and I would never trust a person who cannot tell them apart. See, I revere everyone whose worship is sincere. Nothing is more noble or more beautiful than fervor that is holy, not just dutiful. So nothing is more odious to me than the display of specious piety, which I see in every charlatan who tries to pass for a true holy man. Religious passion worn as a facade abuses what's sacred and mocks God. These men who take what's sacred and most holy and use it as their trade for money solely, with downcast looks and great affected cries, who suck in true believers with their lies, who ceaselessly will preach and then demand give up the world, and then by sleight of hand end up sitting pretty at the court, the best in lodging and new clothes to sport. If you're their enemy, then heaven hates you. That's their claim when one of them berates you. They'll say you've sinned. You'll find yourself removed and wondering if you'll be approved for anything at all ever again. Because so heinous was this fictional sin. When these men are angry, they're the worst. There's no place to hide. You're really cursed. They use what we call righteous as their sword to coldly murder in the name of the Lord. But next to these impostors faking belief, the devotion of the true is a relief. Our century has put before our eyes glorious examples we can prize. Look at Ariston, look at Periand, Orant, Alcidamas, Polydore, Clitandre. Not one points out his own morality. Instead, they speak of their mortality. They don't form cabals, they don't have factions, they don't censure other people's actions. They see the flagrant pride in such correction and know that humans can't achieve perfection. They know this of themselves, and yet their lives, good faith, good works, all good epitomize. They don't exhibit zeal that's more intense than heaven shows us in its own defense. They'd never claim a knowledge that's divine, and yet they live in virtue's own design. They concentrate their hatred on the sin, and when the sinner grieves, invite him in. They leave to others the arrogance of speech, instead they practice what others only preach. These are the men who show us how to live, their lives the best example I can give. These are my men, the ones whom I would follow. Your man and his life honestly are hollow. I believe you praise him quite sincerely. I also think you'll pay for this quite dearly. He's a fraud, this man whom you adore. And so again, this is, I think, a really, really eloquent explanation of it, but Moliere comes back to this over and over and over in the play, that there are good, righteous, honest, religious people, and then there are people who pray in public so that they can fool the gullible who see only appearances. And, if we think to the end of the play, clearly the king is not one of those so easily fooled, according to Moliere.